Hey guys, grab a piece of letter size paper. We're going to use two of them, and we're going to do two drawings, one on each paper. Grab a pencil. I'm going to use a darker pencil so that you guys can see my guidelines, but if you want to use a slightly lighter pencil, that's okay. But we're not going to erase the guidelines like with the other assignments. We're going to keep those in. White eraser, black thin Sharpie. If you don't have one of those, going back over it with a pencil heavier is fine, or a color marker pen, whatever, a ruler, or some kind of straight edge will be required for this next step. We've learned about 1-point perspective. We've learned about 2-point perspective. We've tried some exercises. We even made a staircase. Well, now we are going to create our own design of an urban landscape, a futuristic city, this imaginary place of buildings using 2-point perspective, and we want it to look like a convincing 3D space. This time though, it's our own design, it's our own creation. Before we go to our good copy, we're going to create, as I said, 2 rough sketches or drafts, proposals, whatever you want to call it, and we kind of want to work out some of the issues here, work out what we think it might look like, and then we're going to try 2 completely different drawings and try to resist the temptation just to copy what you did the first time or the very first thing that comes to your mind and make 2 totally different cityscapes. And then if you feel strongly about one of them, we're going to put a little asterisk on one of them, and when you upload your photos, I'll be able to see which one you like better. Now I'm going to demonstrate my own kind of draft version here, and this does not obviously have to be what you do. I'm just providing a suggestion, and of course what we really want is our own design, our own 2-point perspective city. So follow with me. I'm not going to keep this video all in real time. I don't want to bore the death out of you, but I'm going to get things started, and then I'll kind of speed up the video a little bit, and then I'll talk at the end. We'll take our ruler, and we're going to create a rectangle inside that letter piece of paper, approximately 5 inches by 3. And I'm going to try to keep it parallel to the sides of the page. If it's not a big deal. So you can see that mine is landscape orientation at the moment, but also feel free. You may want to go vertical. You don't have to stick to what you see here. I'm going to do mine horizontal. That doesn't mean you have to. I'm going to create a horizon line. And yours doesn't have to be in the same place as mine. Obviously, that changes the perspective, right? It changes whether we're looking up at something or down at something or a combination of the two. And I'm going to draw my horizon line like that, extending outside of that rectangle. The reason I'm going to do that is that sometimes when you put the 2 vanishing points right inside your page, it tends to compress the perspective, and it sometimes looks a little bit squished. So I'm going to try and avoid that by keeping my vanishing points, off of the paper. Now, if you decide, and this is a possibility, guys, you can always tilt your horizon line. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to make your horizon line parallel to the edge of your page or parallel to the edge of the paper. You could tilt it. Sometimes that gives your landscape a sense of movement, a sense of, dynamism that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have. But just keep in mind though, if you tilt that horizon line, you still need to make sure that your verticals are 90 degrees. If you tilt your horizon line this way, yep, those vertical edges or sides of our buildings need to be 90 degrees. We have to stay consistent. All of our verticals are 90 degrees to our horizon line. Now mine are going to be 90 degrees vertical with mine this way because my horizon line is going straight across the page like this. So I'm going to begin to establish some different buildings or forms in this imaginary cityscape. I'd like you to include 5 to 7 forms in your draft proposal. They can be cubes, they could be cylinders, and you could even put some spheres in there. However, at least 2 or 3 of the shapes minimum should be rectangles or cubes that show your demonstration of two-point perspective. Cones and cylinders and spheres, because they don't have those straight angles on the side, they can't follow the vanishing points on the side. So we have to handle those in a different way, where the big stuff, or the things that are closest to us, will be bigger, things that look further away will get a little bit smaller, and then things that are further away will get smaller even still. So we'll talk a little bit more about those things later, but 5 to 7 different shapes in your imaginary city, and at least 2 to 3 of them have to be cube-like in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to start with my front edge. Let's say I'm going to put a building down here. This is my front edge. And I'm going to put another big guy right here. And this is something that I'd like you to try in your composition. Break the picture plane. Have something in the foreground that busts out of the picture. In other words, it looks like it's cropped. What that will do is create a more dramatic sense of space of front to back. I'm going to join this up to my VP. I'm going to join that one up to my VP. And a lot of this drawing at this point is just all going to be pencil work. And I'm going to go over it later with my fine tip Sharpie, and I'll define my buildings and the actual forms that I have so I can see things more clearly. But at this point, it might feel a little bit confusing because we've got a lot of intersecting lines, but hey, we've done this. We've practiced this, so we know what's going on here. I'm going to actually put a cube on top of a cube. And I'm going to imagine that I've got this building that's kind of like maybe another layer of a building on top of a building. And I'm going to put this vertical line right here. Once you get used to the procedure of two-point perspective, you may find that you can move a little bit faster and you don't feel as self-conscious. But when we're learning, it might feel a little bit slow, maybe even a little bit weird. That's okay. Now, I've tried this many times before, right? So maybe, it feels a little bit easier for me, and I can kind of imagine what my next step is going to be. Oh, I'm just going to join up that building, join up that building. Okay, so now I've got something, a building on top of a building. And I'm going to put another edge right here. It's above the horizon line, so now it's beginning to look like we are looking up at the building. It's so big, or I don't know, epic, that the building looks like it's going up into the sky right now, which can be kind of cool when you go above the horizon line. All right, line that guy up. And I'm going to put, I don't know, some kind of like imaginary ball or dome or sphere on the top of that just to give it some variety. I think I'm going to put a little window in my building right here. And if we have windows, yeah, they also follow two-point perspective. So this window on this side is going to go to the VP on the right, like so. And then the bottom of the window will also go to the VP on the right, like that. So the windows or even the insides stay true to the VPs. We don't suddenly just change the rules because we've got a window or something on the inside. If it's square, if it's a rectangle, it must follow the VPs. Circles, well, that's a different story. Okay, so I got a couple of windows on each side of my building there. And let's say I even wanted to give these buildings a little bit of thickness. I could even take this a step further. And I could make a window ledge and draw to there. And then this little corner of the window will go to the other VP. This guy here is going to go straight up and down. And can you see how that looks now like suddenly the window has depth? It's not just an architectural feature on the outside. It actually looks like it's going inside the building. Let me just finish that off over here. Straight. I want to go to the VP on the other side for the corner. And then the VP over here. All right, so now I've got two windows. It doesn't have any shading or anything, but I'm just kind of getting it started. All right, so this is the beginning of one of my drafts of my imaginary city. And I'm going to keep going. And at this point, I'm going to speed the video up. And, that way it just won't be too boring for you to watch every, excruciating step. And I'm also going to take my Sharpie, you'll notice at the end, and I'm going to add some values, and I'm going to add a light source over here, let's say, and I'm going to begin to add in some general values, light, middle, and dark, and I'm also going to add some cast shadows into my draft piece. All right, I'll keep the party going here and see what happens. My finished first draft, and I've tried to include a few things. This is listed on the assignment sheet called Futuristic City Draft. Okay, so let's just review. I'd like us to try two of these. Obviously, I just did one, and my second one, I'm going to try to make something completely different and not just copy what I've done. We want to have anywhere from 5 to 7 different forms in our composition, and I've got 1, 2, 3, I guess 4 main buildings, and then there are some other forms on top, and I've got some clouds. It's debatable maybe. Do I have 5 forms? I've created more than 5, but they're stacked one on top of the other. Cubes, and I've gone with spheres, but you could also go with pyramids. You could go with cones. You could go with cylinders. As long as you've got 2 to 3 cubes somewhere in there. We want to make sure that our verticals are 90 degrees to our horizon line. Whether it's tilted this way or that way, it's always 90 degrees. And we want to try to create a sense of foreground, middle ground, background. So I've got a building here that looks bigger because it's closer to us. Number 2, he seems to be a little bit smaller, so he looks further back. Middle ground in here. And then way off in the background is a smaller looking building. So somehow in your composition, change the size so that it goes big, front, middle, and off in the distance, smaller. Changing the size, but staying true to 2-point perspective if it's a cube. Obviously, we're going to keep this 2-point perspective. It's not a 1-point perspective assignment. And I'd also like us to try to do overlap. All right, so some shapes should be in front of other things. And what that does is when you put one thing in front of something else, even without linear perspective, that thing that's in front is going to, by its very nature, look closer to us. So overlap some things, have some buildings or shapes or whatever in front of other things. In my case, I have some buildings in front of these imaginary clouds, which creates a little bit of overlap. On our draft piece, we don't have to get too crazy with shading at this point, and you can just go 3 value ranges, your light, your middle, and your dark, based on an imaginary light source. And we're going to try to break the picture plane. So 1 or 2 or several of these shapes are going to go outside of, or they would appear that they break outside of the frame of your 5x3 rectangle. We're going to have a single light source, as I mentioned, and also as you work out the composition and all the shapes, try to strike a balance between positive and negative space. Positive space would be the space that the buildings take up, and the negative space are the spaces in between the buildings, the cast shadows, the sky, the horizon line, whatever's above the horizon line. And those things are just as important as the space that the buildings take up. So do you feel that there's sort of an equal amount of space of both positive and negative? It doesn't have to be a mirror image to be balanced. Things don't have to be the same on either side, but if it looks a little bit that the weight is too heavy on one side because there's too much stuff over in one area, if there's too much darkness over in one area, or if it seems for whatever reason distracting in one spot, you may want to rearrange your shape so things look more evenly distributed or weighted. All right, so give this a shot, guys. Try 2 of these and hold them up. Get in close, please. Take a photo of yourself holding both of these, and if you want to, put a little asterisk beside the one that you like. This is step 1.